Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Stephanie, and we're going to be talking about a number of things, but also talking about her book, Evaluate and Optimize Your Enablement Maturity Journey, which I've read
Yeah.
and it's very good. Stephanie, where can people find you?
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, Phoenix GTM.com. You can find my book on Amazon if you just search for my name. So yeah, I'm in so many different places. You can find me everywhere. Yeah,
So thanks for coming on and to
yeah.
talk about your book. Um, I loved it. I think it's a really great book.
Thank you.
Clearly, it's a book about sales enablement.
Yes.
And what 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 was the inspiration behind writing it?
Yeah. In all honesty, I've always kind of like thought about writing a book. So I was an English major in college, so I obviously studied a lot of literature and everything. I originally created the maturity model for a client of mine when I was consulting full time last year, and they were looking to rebuild kind of their enablement function and like what should it look like, what can it look like, where are we right now, where should we be going to. So I built out kind of this strategy or this framework for them. And then when I was thinking back late last year, I was like, this is something that I've struggled with myself. I've seen other people in my consulting kind of opportunities struggle with it. I've seen peers struggling with it. It's like, what if I just kind of turn this into like a legitimate kind of strategy that everybody can kind of grab a hold of, whether you're in enablement or operations or you're like a C-suite executive, like what should our enablement function be? Like, what should we be kind of like going
Yeah,
for? So I always thought it would be cool to write a book, and then but I wasn't sure, like, do I write fiction? Do I write something like work related? And here we are. It just kind of came into being after some nights and weekends, just kind of piddling around a little bit, and it was exciting. It was a fun little journey to do.
yeah. I mean, there aren't very many books on sales enablement,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure that there's that many on, or if any at all, on um, the a maturity model, which you've outlined in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so one of the things, the book is very practical, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been my approach to like enablement just in
Because you've
general
got
with
like little
anything.
check boxes and stuff in it.
Yeah, yeah. I like to take I'm first generation like business strategy person. So for me, I'm just like, but what does that look like in a tactical kind of everyday thing? That's been my approach whenever I've shared things on LinkedIn or anything like that. And I wanted my book to kind of follow that exact same tone of like, we're going to cover the strategy, we're going to talk about all of the things, but like if you're like a team of one or a small team or like whatever, like, but what can I actually take away from this? Like, what instead of me interpreting something or whatever, like, let's get down into the weeds. Like, let's show you some true examples. Let's walk you through some exercises and worksheets and stuff. I wanted to make sure that it was something that people could actually like work through, like a workbook plus strategy, basically.
So would you say that sales enablement is linear?
No. No, absolutely not. I've seen this in my current role. I'm a team of one at a startup organization. We play in like the AI space, the AI infrastructure space, and I see it pretty consistently, especially when it comes to like startup enablement. Is you'll be like on this like amazing path of maturity with your enablement org, and then all of a sudden the market shifts or some like your leadership changes or whatever, and it kind of punts you back a little bit. So it's definitely not linear, and I don't think it should be either. I think this is business. This is the way the markets typically kind of work. Is you see like an upswing, and then all of a sudden it kind of like comes down a little bit, and then it plateaus, and then it goes up, and then it goes down. Like you see it pretty consistently just across the board in general. And I think this is it's an important thing to call out, and I call it out several times in the book as well of like don't get down on yourself if you see yourself having to pull back into more of a reactive mode. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means that you need to be a little bit more flexible to market shifts and business shifts and leadership changes and adjustments, like whatever. It's not a bad thing. It just means that you have to be a little bit more flexible.
And in terms of the you talk in the book also about having guardrails and that for, and it's
Yeah.
about providing guardrails for salespeople.
Yes. Yeah. I believe strongly that this is companies are going to be a little bit different. Reps are going to be a little bit different. Guaranteed anybody that's listening to this has encountered those sales leaders, those sales reps that are just going to be those mavericks, those kind of like lone wolves that are often doing their own thing. And it is what it is. You can try and like bring them into the fold and get them to adopt some of the things that we're working on. But ideally, you want to set up some guardrails, especially. And I speak a lot to like startup enablement because that's where I live and breathe. Um, Things change so quickly, and they should. You should be like adjustable to the business while still remaining like or keeping some like guardrails on the thing. You don't want to like all of a sudden go off the cliff, but you can kind of maneuver around within those guardrails and absolutely like keep those people on track and the things kind of like going, but ultimately just like here's your little sandbox, you get to play in the sandbox, you don't go off the rails a little bit.
So Matt agrees with you. He says, "Amen. No company is ever the same, and no reps are ever the same." Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Thanks, Matt.
What's your definition of sales enablement?
um in in my opinion, enablement should be defined for the company that you're at. I believe strongly that you should mold your enablement strategy to the company that you're supporting instead of trying to mold the company to your enablement strategy. I've done that, been there, and it ends up in a lot of frustration. At the end of the day, when I approach enablement though, like again, guardrails, kind of like sandbox to play in, I really do believe that you should my goal is to maximize, or for my reps to maximize every customer interaction, engagement, conversation that they're having. That's going to encompass a number of different things, including like skills and behaviors and process and tools. And like all of that kind of falls, and like training and knowledge, and like all of that falls within the realm of enablement. So when I've developed my enablement charters at my organizations, my North Star remains to be like, I want to help my reps maximize every conversation that they've got with their customers, which right now is more important than ever. So I think it's really important to kind of like double down on that, and then understand, what does your business need you to be? Do they need you to be more reactive for a little bit or for a while? That's where I find myself kind of now at my organization is, yeah, we need to be a little bit more reactive with the shifts of AI is changing every day. That's okay. How do I think ahead and look into my crystal ball of like, but how can I make something now and then scale it for the future, or make it so that it can scale in the future when we're ready to? Um, Long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think it was very good. You talk in the book about spontaneous enablement, which is like the lowest level of maturity. It, you must have come across that a lot. So explain to us what that is, just in case there's anybody out there that are currently feeling spontaneous enablement.
Spontaneous enablement is it's literally that. It's just your sales leader is coming to you on like, Stephanie, I had this great idea 5 minutes ago that I gave probably zero thought to. And we're just gonna like, this is gonna change the game. This is gonna do everything that we need it to do. And that is basically just kind of it's the super reactive. You're not proactively looking ahead to anything. It's just you're kind of taking the things as they come in. And everybody finds themselves in that kind of, especially in startup enablement or enablement at a startup organization. You're going to find yourself there in that stage probably for a little while. And again, it's all about figuring out like, how do I respond to kind of this spontaneous request? How can I take that and maybe create something more from it? So perfect example being, hey, we need you to launch this skills train. Like we need, our reps need better discovery training,
Yeah.
basically, because they are sucking at discovery. Great. I'm gonna look to that. I'm gonna create some kind of support initiative around that. And then can I double down on that to now include that in my onboarding material, and then make sure that I've got a reinforcement plan in place for everything? So like, how can I take that one request and duplicate it kind of across a number of different areas that I might be responsible for.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it so many times that you're in a sales meeting, something is discussed, and all of a sudden there's a requirement for something,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Oh,
well,
we need enablement on that. Yeah.
yeah, where did that come from? Because
Yeah.
in a way, as you said, key word is about proactive it, and making sure that you should actually have a relationship with the sales team. They're actually
Yeah.
bringing that to you in advance of sales meetings, and that, don't you think?
Ideally, yes. In an ideal world, absolutely. And usually what I try to do as well is like look to what are my company initiatives, because you're going to get pulled in enablement in a number of different directions. You're going to have the C-suite setting kind of company objectives and initiatives at the top level. You're going to have your frontline managers that are focused on maybe something, hopefully, God willing, in the same kind of realm as like the company initiatives. And then you're going to have your reps coming to you and being like, well, I can't do discovery unless I've got proper pipeline set up, and all of my tooling for my pipeline generation is just crap. So like what do we do for that? So it's taking all of the information across the organization, which enablement has a unique position to talk to all of those cross-functional partners pretty regularly, ideally. Um, Taking all of that information and figuring out like, okay, do we have enough, like who's, what do we focus on, prioritizing, understanding kind of like what are the needs, can you double dip in a couple of areas, can you pull things together? So it's kind of understanding like what's the biggest bang for my buck, as well as what's the low hanging fruit that I can maybe just like knock out pretty quickly and get a high return or impact on.
So you then talk about moving from spontaneous to on demand. What's your definition of on demand enablement?
Yeah. So usually for spontaneous enablement, it's other people within the business are kind of like picking up the pieces of training and information sharing and that kind of stuff. On demand enablement is usually where you start seeing companies being like, we could actually, this could be like a full function. This is where I've found myself a number of times. I'm the first enablement hire. They're bringing me in to kind of build the entire uh, department kind of from the ground up. The company is recognizing that there's a need for enablement support across the organization. That's the biggest catalyst between the two, is usually like it's a dedicated function for like on-demand enablement. You're still going to have elements of spontaneous, right? Just like we mentioned before, it's not a linear kind of progression. So you're still going to have elements of that, but you've got a dedicated function, ideally with executive frontline manager kind of support and buy-in, that now you can start standing up like, okay, we've got like a V1 onboarding program instead of just like a document that product marketing or sales leader kind of put together of like, read all these all these articles. Now we've got some legitimate kind of initiatives and trainings and information transfer and foundational elements that are starting to be built.
And I guess that leads on to ultimately to your structured enablement.
Yes. Yes. So ideally, this is where you're going to start seeing you're putting in more than just guardrails. Like if I'm going to go with a house analogy for this one a little bit more too. So like you built the foundation with on demand kind of enablement. Then you're moving forward. You're like, okay, we're gonna put up the walls. We're gonna start figuring out like what does this actually look like. I'm gonna create a charter. I'm gonna start creating like an intake form. I'm gonna be prioritizing ruthlessly when it comes to requests that are coming in. I'm looking to ideally start being more 75% reactive, more 25% proactive on things. I'm outlining quarterly priorities. I'm working closer or strongly with cross-functional partners. This is ideally where you start seeing the enablement team grow. You start adding people. It's not just a team of one anymore. You can start adding additional support to really kind of amplify the impact that enablement can make across the organization.
So when you're talking about cross, um, talking, so onboarding requires you to talk to HR,
Yes.
and if marketing are running certain campaigns, you may actually be involved in enabling something to do with the campaign.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So ideally you're working, you've got your finger on the pulse of a number of different aspects of the business. You're working with HR and frontline managers on like who are we bringing in, who are we hiring, when are they being hired, and how is enablement going to be able to support them get up to speed and ramp as quickly as possible. If you've got a product launch, ideally you're working with like product marketing, you're working with marketing on potential campaigns, you're working with product managers to understand like what does the field team or what do the field teams need to understand and know in order to execute on whatever the ultimate goal of this product launch is. If you're doing like pipeline generation, like great, I'm going to work with demand gen and marketing. I'm going to work with our product marketing team on like value propositions and messaging. I'm going to work with our sales leadership. I'm going to work with RevOps on tooling. I'm going to understand the entire scope. So ideally, enablement is kind of coordinating all of these multiple conversations and then wrapping everything up in an initiative to kind of help roll out and deliver to the business and then ideally measure on the back end.
And there can be a timeline associated with that. For example, what you do in Q1 could be different from what you're doing in Q4.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, ideally, you're working on building blocks for the entire thing. So what you build foundationally in Q1, now you're going to like reinforce in Q4. And I think this is where you really start seeing kind of the maturity of the organization of, okay, we did like full-blown pipeline generation training back in Q1. We're seeing, some uptick as far as like the leads that we're able to generate, the opportunities that we're able to generate, but things are maybe getting a little bit stuck in the funnel somewhere at the top of the funnel. Do we talk to marketing? How can we pull some levers to kind of understand? So you've got a baseline foundation of like the reps are doing everything that they need. We're still not seeing the results that we want. What are some other things across the business that maybe we need to do? Or is there additional training that's needed? So like figuring out like timeline wise, what needs to happen when and in what order really. That's where you're going to start seeing some like really big impact.
And I guess also you're working with RevOps in terms of they're looking at the figures and they may say, well, we seem to be the pipeline seems to be stuck here, or
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I come from a sales ops kind of background. So like for me, data is going to be the lifeblood of being able to look into something and say, we're seeing like we don't have enough pipeline in like looking ahead 2 quarters. Our pipeline is looking really low. We need to like get on this like ahead of time. Or like rolling out tooling to support certain initiatives or whatever it is, like optimizing Salesforce. One of my last companies that I was at, one of the gals on my team took a look at our sales process and was like, our exit entry criteria is kind of wobbly. It seems to be like not really all that great. I think if we tighten it up a little bit, she worked really closely with revenue operations and sales leadership in order to do that. So like identifying like all of the things, it's not just enablement isn't just and shouldn't just be training and information transfer. It also should be, especially in the later stages of maturity, identifying like where are the gaps? Where are the roadblocks? Where are the things that need to be kind of removed, adjusted, changed, or whatever in order to make our teams successful and impactful, especially when you see the market starting to be, kind of weird.
is that so? So you talked earlier on about being 25% proactive,
Mm,
75% reactive.
yep,
As we move to you, because you talk about spontaneous, on demand, structured, advanced, and optimal, is that
yep.
where you're moving towards 75% proactive, 25% reactive?
Ideally, yes. I would love to see like the optimal like stage is kind of the nirvana of enablement. And I think this is where ideally you're setting like at least at the very minimum like a half year, like a half fiscal year roadmap of like, all right, these are the skill developments that we're going to have. These are the product trainings that we're going to have based on the product roadmap. This is the messaging that needs to change. Like we know at least for a half, ideally a full fiscal year at a high level, this is what's going to be covered. And that's like the 75%. There's always going to be fires. No matter how mature your business is, no matter how mature your enablement organization is, there will always be things. COVID is a perfect example. It like
Yes.
came out of nowhere and people had to like shift
Your
everything.
top salesperson leaving.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So these are things that you always have to like bank for, but ideally you're moving towards more of the no, this is on the roadmap. This is what we're planning for. This is the strategy that we've kind of set in place. That's the end goal is to get to that. You will never be 100% proactive. I wish that was the case, but it's just in my opinion, not possible.
Steph, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book,
Yes. Thanks for
Elevate and
having me.
Optimize, Your Enablement Maturity Journey. Really great book, really loved it. If I wanted to buy one, where could I get one?
I'm exclusively on Amazon, so I would go onto Amazon. You can search based on my name. You can search based on enablement. You'll find it, and it's available across all marketplaces in the U.S. and the U.K. and EMEA and everywhere outside of there. So give it a read. It's available on an ebook format and paperback format, like you've got there. Would love any and all feedback, and if anybody wants to have a conversation, find me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat more about it.
And the best place to find you is where?
Definitely on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you so much for coming.